This morning, President Erdogan has addressed the Crimean conference. He's done it on Zoom, I think, because people aren't able to meet as they normally would each year in Crimea. And it's a declaration that not only underscores Turkey's enduring solidarity with Ukraine, which I think is something that is useful to hear at this moment, but it also signals a diplomatic commitment to restoring peace and to reinvigorating cultural ties in the region. So as people are now digesting that speech, it's essential to recognize the multiple layers in the message: a firm stance against conflict, a call to preserve ethnic minorities, an invitation for inclusive dialogue that may very well reshape regional diplomacy. This is a much more positive message than the rubbish sent by Trump. I don't know whether Erdogan's message will have more success than Trump's, but it certainly has more coherence. The backdrop for Erdogan's remarks is, of course, the prolonged and tragic conflict in Ukraine, and over the last 3 years, 3 years today, when Russia's tanks attempted to push across the border into Kyiv itself, Ukraine's steadfast defence of its homeland has been met with profound sacrifices and loss, and Turkey has not remained a passive observer. Since 2014, when the capture of Crimea marked such a significant global shift, Turkey has consistently supported Ukraine. The Turkish government's historical backing, particularly its support for the Crimean Tatars, is deeply rooted in both cultural affinity and strategic interest. Erdogan's speech today reiterates that tradition of support, emphasizing that Turkey stood by Ukraine from the very onset of hostilities and continues to employ every available diplomatic tool to urge the cessation of violence, the stopping of this war. Central to Erdogan's statement is his unambiguous declaration of solidarity with the Ukrainian people, and he extended condolences to their families, to the families of the people who have suffered immeasurable losses because of Putin's belligerence, and his words resonate with empathy for a nation that has for too long been embroiled in unreasonable and grotesque conflict. In emphasizing unity with Ukraine, Erdogan not only appeals to a sense of common humanity, but also subtly reinforces Turkey's moral stance in the international arena as Ramadan approaches. His promise to work for a stable peace with Russia reflects his pragmatic approach, a recognition that lasting peace in the region requires dialogue and balance, that these two neighbours have to coexist, rather than the unilateral triumph or the continued escalation, or indeed a nonsense ceasefire in the form of a Minsk III. The call for peace is both timely and necessary. Erdogan's pledge to move away from war towards negotiations, indeed his overture to host peace talks in Ankara this morning, suggests that Turkey is positioning itself as a credible mediator. By offering Ankara as a venue for dialogue, Turkey is not only capitalizing on its historical and geographical position, but also signaling its readiness to engage with all parties on an equal footing. This initiative is noteworthy because it hints at a broader vision, one that envisages conflict resolution not as a zero-sum game, but as a cooperative process that respects territorial integrity, sovereignty, and cultural diversity. Another significant facet of Erdogan's address is his emphasis on the need to re-establish the Tatar community in Ukraine. And I spoke about this yesterday, and about the extraordinary Sinan Mosque in Ukraine. The Crimean Tatars hold a unique position in the historical tapestry of the region. Their cultural and historical ties to the Crimean Peninsula render their reunion there not merely a matter of ethnic preservation, but a crucial element in restoring the social and cultural fabric of the Crimea that has been disrupted by the conflict and by Russian aggression. Erdogan's reference to the Tatar and Crimean peoples goes beyond symbolic gestures, in other words. It speaks to the recognition that peace is not only achieved through the cessation of hostilities, but also through the rejuvenation of communities that have been fractured by war, no matter when those wars took place, no matter when when that aggression happened. In this light, re-establishing the Tatar community becomes an act of cultural and political reconciliation, reconstituting what was, a step towards healing old wounds and ensuring that minority voices are not marginalized in the post-conflict reconstruction process. A striking element of Erdogan's message is his assertion of Turkey's desire for a stable peace with Russia alongside its unyielding support for Ukraine. This dual approach is emblematic of Turkey's broader foreign policy strategy, a balancing act that seeks to preserve cordial relations with Russia while upholding the principles of territorial integrity and national sovereignty. Erdogan's remarks suggest that Turkey is not interested in exacerbating tensions, but rather in creating an environment conducive to dialogue. And by stating that Turkey continues to work on establishing a stable peace with Russia, he acknowledges the complexity of the regional makeup of Russia, of Ukraine, of that area. It's a pragmatic recognition that any sustainable resolution to the Ukrainian crisis must involve an inclusive negotiation process, one that accounts for the legitimate interests and the security concerns of all parties involved. It cannot be another Minsk, where effectively a gun is held to the head of one party and it capitulates. We need to look back to the Versailles Treaty to see how badly that was handled. And essential reading for anyone is The Economic Consequences of Peace, John Maynard Keynes' superb book that explains why the Versailles Treaty was a disaster. Another noteworthy aspect of the speech is the symbolic resonance of its timing. As the nation as Turkey prepares to begin Ramadan next week, a period imbued with themes of reflection, renewal and community, Erdogan's wish for a peaceful Muslim world and beyond carries additional weight. The convergence of these themes underscores his vision for a future where conflict is supplanted by coexistence and mutual respect. Furthermore, the remark that the traditional meeting in Crimea had to be abandoned because of the war is a poignant reminder of how conflict disrupts not only the political processes but all the cultural and the social rhythms of life. In invoking this disruption, Erdogan implicitly calls for a restoration of both peace and tradition, a return to the natural cycle of events that nurtures community bonds and cultural continuity. The statement by the Turkish president projects an image of Turkey as a constructive mediating force in one of the most turbulent regions of our time. His call for peace, rooted in historical support and cultural brotherhood, cultural solidarity, is both a moral and a strategic appeal. And the proposed negotiations in Ankara could serve as a significant turning point, offering a neutral platform where divergent interests might be reconciled through dialogue rather than conflict. Yet challenges remain, of course they do. The path to lasting peace is fraught with complexity. Historical grievances, regional power dynamics, and the scars of a long and brutal conflict. While Erdogan's commitment to negotiating peace and supporting minority communities is commendable, it will require the sustained engagement of all stakeholders and a willingness to compromise for a durable solution to emerge. Nonetheless, this statement marks an important moment in regional diplomacy. It underscores Turkey's enduring commitment to peace, the restoration of cultural identities, and the belief that dialogue is the only viable path to resolving long-standing conflict. And so, looking forward to 2025 and beyond, Erdogan's vision, if supported by concerted international effort, might indeed pave the way for a more stable and harmonious future in Eastern Europe and in the broader region.